things first, a little bit about me. I've been at PBS for the past 5 years or so. I work primarily in the group that works on things that can build revenue for PBS's initiatives. So most of the things I work on are either subscription-based or for sale, which is a little bit unusual for PBS. A lot of our offerings are free, but you know, everybody needs to keep the lights on, and so that's why we're developing apps for the paid market. So if you're familiar with the PBS system, you'll know that we've been around for about 40 years. And one of the reasons that PBS was founded was because it was really clear that television was becoming a vast wasteland of programming. And it was really apparent to a lot of folks out there, including Fred Rogers, that there were real needs for kids to have content that really was appropriate to both their developmental stage and their age and the kinds of things that kids needed to be learning. So PBS as an entity is always looking for ways to reach kids wherever they are. And now that we have these mobile platforms, we're really seriously looking at mobile as a very important way to reach kids wherever they are. So of course, PBS is first and foremost a broadcast organization, and so we have been developing award-winning television shows for kids for those 40 years. In August, as you see here, PBS had 7 of the top 10 programs among mothers of young children, including Super Y, Sesame Street, Curious George, Dinosaur Train, and The Cat in the Hat knows a lot about that. Now obviously, some of these brands are new, like Super Y, some are old, like Sesame Street and Curious George, but they all have a place on the mobile platform. So, as part of our mission, we always develop each show around a particular curriculum focus. In the case of Curious George, that's science and exploration. In the case of Super Y, it's literacy. And when we are developing the show, we're always thinking about these other platforms that we can reach out to. So interactive online games, whiteboard games, mobile, and we've really been successful in drawing kids to these platforms. So pbskids.org had 10 million unique visitors last year, and we get a lot of repeat visitors. They come back and they play the games again and again. So we were hoping to replicate that on mobile. So we started doing mobile apps in 2009 with a couple of experimental apps, which I'll talk about in a little while. And now we have 13 PBS Kids apps live in the iTunes App Store. We have had more than 1.2 million downloads. This includes one of our apps that actually plays video clips from the PBS shows that was launched just this summer and is doing some amazing things with video streaming, and I'll talk about that. So, just like with our shows, we use our successful characters to build successful apps. And we work with each character's specific curriculum that is based around their character traits. So, Sid the Science Kid. He is, I think he's 4 or 5 years old, so that limits a little bit what he's able to do in the world. So he is very inquisitive, and he's always asking why. And so that is something that the whole show is based around. And so when we decided to do an app for Sid, we also wanted to ask why and have a very exploratory app that was built around that concept. Curious George doesn't speak, so that means that it's a little challenging sometimes to develop games with a character that can't tell you what to do. So it's something that we explore very carefully. So our first app was called My Journal. It was for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was a little bit of an experiment. It was a game that we had developed for another platform. It was initially on the web, and it was a Flash-based game. And we really wanted to explore, okay, how is this going to work? Can we do something social-emotional? And at the time, there really wasn't anything social-emotional in the App Store. And I should qualify, right now, we're just talking about iOS apps. We do have one Android app, and I can answer questions about that, but I'm not going to present on it specifically. So this helps kids talk about their feelings around these 5 topics. So it walks them through a story, basically making a storybook. And I've done one quickly here. Sometimes I pretend to be a superhero. And when kids tap on each of the different icons there, they get the voiceover of what it is. So sometimes I pretend to be a superhero, a policeman, a baby, an animal, or I think a mom is the last one. And then it helps kids structure, much like Fred Rogers did in the show, kind of structure their feelings around what they do when they're doing these things. So when I pretend I sing or dance or cry or stomp my foot, and then that makes me feel silly or brave or strong. And then at the end of the app, you get the child gets the opportunity to actually draw and express their feelings themselves. The rest of the stages, you know, we kind of have predetermined things to help kids walk through their feelings a little bit. So that was our first app. It was done with a very, very small budget. And it did pretty well, but, you know, again, it was, Mr. Rogers, unfortunately, is no longer with us. We don't have him on air in most markets anymore, and so it didn't get a lot of hits in the App Store, although we were pretty pleased with how well it did. Now, Martha Speaks is a brand that started as a book. And Martha, if you're not familiar with the books, Martha is a talking dog who gets into lots of trouble because she can talk. And so we did an app for them, basically looking into exploring vocabulary and building vocabulary. And this was a really fantastic app because we were able to actually do some testing with it and see if kids were actually able to improve their vocabulary. And in fact, their vocabulary improved by 31% after playing with the app over a period of time, about 2 weeks. There's a couple of different games here. Chow Time is very popular because once you have actually correctly identified the plate that goes with the word that's at the bottom, then you get to lick the plate clean using the dog's tongue. And it makes lovely slurping noises, which is very, very popular if you're 5. And then you have a doggy dress-up activity where you can see that on the left. And what Martha does is she'll speak a word then in context. So she'll say, that is very fashionable, or something like that, once you have taken a picture of your dog. And then finally, it's kind of a Martha Speaks, Martha Says, like Simon Says, where you have to actually use these different words in context. So amble, you have to press each dog until they're walking slowly. And there's all these different synonyms for stop, go, run fast in there. And it's really funny because we've had some anecdotal reports from parents who are like, oh, this is so great because now my kid comes up and says, halt! So, and then at the very end of the app, you can go in and you can kind of test the words that you've learned. And kids love to do this and see how many they can get right in a row. Now, Super Y, if you're at all familiar with the kids category in the iTunes App Store, you'll be familiar with this app. It's been in the top 5, for a number of months in a row. I can't even remember how many. And it's really, I mean, I think that this is the perfect storm of an app that has some good redeeming educational value as well as a really, really popular brand. Super Y is huge with kids. They love the empowerment that they get from the app and being able to go in and actually write the letters here with Princess Presto. And this is an interesting game. One of the rules that we have often used in the past in developing games for kids is don't make the wrong answer funnier than the right answer, because you don't want to encourage the wrong answer necessarily. So what the developer did with this game, which was really interesting, was they actually just said, okay, well, we don't necessarily want to make this funny, but we'll just show. So if you actually click on plane, it will show that Goldilocks slept in Little Bear's plane. It'll actually change the art. And so it will be really clear to the kid right away that actually they've gotten it wrong. And they won't get the sticker that comes with getting the right answer until they do it correct. But they can see the context, and that really helps with learning. Wonder Red's specialty is rhyming, and so we go through the rhyming families. And then at the most basic level, you can spell words with AlphaPig, and every time you finish a word correctly or use the word correctly in the game, you get a sticker for it, and then you can play with that sticker in your sticker book. But that was all informed by Superwise. Superwise was developed by Out of the Blue Enterprises, which was founded by Angela Santamero, who did Blue's Clues. And they have done years' worth of research into literacy approach. And so they have a very structured approach for each character. Each character has specific skills that they can help work with the child. So the characters were really driving that game. Now here's Dinosaur Express. This is for the Henson Company. Dinosaur Train is obviously another interesting perfect storm of dinosaurs and trains. Who would have thought that that would be successful? It's really a funny show, and it explores a lot of really great dinosaur knowledge, as well as the idea of maybe not fitting in, because Buddy is a T-Rex and he's been adopted by a pterodon family. So this app, we took a slightly lighter approach, and we did a simple seek and find, followed by a matching game, followed by some dinosaur facts. And what we did with this app was a little bit different than anything that we'd tried before. We actually did an update strategy with this, where we released new content every month or so for 3 months to see if people would have an uptake. And it was really interesting to see that people did come back and download the updates. So that was an experiment for us again. Another experiment for a slightly older audience is an app that went with a web-only property. We've been experimenting with this at PBS Kids Go in particular, doing properties that maybe aren't quite suited for television, but we want to explore the content area. And this is Corporal Cup's Food Camp is with Fizzy's Lunch Lab, which is a web-only property that explores healthy eating and healthy food habits. Unfortunately, we did learn a lesson with Fizzy's Lunch Lab, Corporal Cup's Food Camp, which is a really long name. And that is, if it's not a recognizable brand, we're going to have a hard time getting it to download. We have not been super pleased with the number of downloads, and it's a really fun app. So we're still hopeful that we might be able to do something with it, but it really drove home to us the power of the brand in this 3 to 6, 6 to 8 kind of age range. Now here we have a couple more apps. These are a little bit lighter weight. Photo Factory just allows you to take a picture of your kid, and then they can explore putting themselves in the picture with PBS Kids characters, including the PBS Kids branded characters, as well as Curious George and Super Y, and you can decorate it, and it's a lot of fun. Kids love that app. And then also just a straight painting app with Super Y. Wordball was an interesting experiment. This was our very first kind of arcade-style game, and it combines the use of video with educational content. So you're seeing a music video from the show, collecting word balls, and then you're using those word balls that you've collected in the video in an arcade-style game. This is our most recent, well, not our most recent, I should say. Over the summer, we released the PBS Kids video for iPad player, and this has been just an unbelievable success. In August, I first talked about this at the Duster Magic App Camp this spring, and it had just come out, and we'd had 10 million streams, and we were so excited. And it had been out for like 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that. In August, there were 61 million streams of video from this app, which is almost half of all the PBS Kids video player, online, offline. This is using the same back end as the video player that we use on our website, and we have been blown away with how successful it is. And basically, as you can see, there's a list of characters down the side. It's extremely kid-friendly. Kids can navigate through this app without any difficulty. There's parent information at the bottom that they can slide out. Here it's shown slid out, but normally the eye is just all the way off to the left there. And they can go in and they can pick their favorite clips, or they can just watch the playlist as it goes through. Sid's Science Fair just came out in September, and this I alluded to before. It's a very simple exploratory app where you can use a magnifying glass to find targets, as you can see with the alphabet blocks up in the top. You explore some simple charts, and each of these is driven by one of the characters from the show, which has, you know, a specialty. You know, May does charting and she loves math, and so she talks you through kind of why a chart is important and what it can be used for. Gabriella loves to collect things, and so she's showing you through her different collections and challenging the user to find different details in her collections. And then Gerald is helping you explore the concept of time and change over time. So his game is called Time Machine, and you can see once you've put the flower pieces, the flower stages in order, then you can actually scroll back and forth kind of in a quick time lapse. Little Pim, gee, that's really small, I'm sorry. This is actually an iPad app, and we're coming out with a series of these in association with the Little Pim company, which does educational DVDs for different language learning for kids 3 to 6. It's a series of games that we had done for another one of our initiatives, PBS Kids Play. And we ported it over to the iPad because we really felt that the experience would work well. And so we've come out with Spanish. French is coming out next week, or the end of this week, I guess. And then we also have Mandarin Chinese, which we'll be coming out with shortly. Again, this is a little bit of an experiment because it's not a broadcast property that we work with, but we think it's important to have the curriculum area of languages represented in what we're providing. And another big one that we have coming out pretty soon is Superwise Alpha Boost. This is a new exploration of Super Y in a little bit more of a Twitch arcade style game, and we're hoping that kids will really love the fact that it's based around parties. You have all sorts of parties, birthday parties, Halloween parties that you can explore. And you can collect different things. And the goal of the game is to spell a party-related word. So in this case, it's pumpkins. So what's next? We're doing a lot, obviously. And we have lots more in store. We have a number of apps in the planning stages at this point. Both for Super Y as well as for Dinosaur Trains and Sid the Science Kid, and as well as for some of the other great properties that we'll have coming out soon. We have some great new shows that are coming next year, and we're working on app plans for those. We are also talking about Android. Now, we do have one Android app right now. It's the same thing as the Super Y app. We ported it over to Android. It was a little bit of a challenging experience, to be perfectly honest. It took us a while, almost 10 months, to get it to port. And it hasn't been as successful as we've wanted it to be, but there's a lot of reasons that that's probably the case. And so we are still really looking into that as a platform. We're just taking it slow because obviously, like everyone, we have constraints as far as funding. But we are definitely looking into doing series of apps to explore different elements of the curriculum for each series. And tablets, of course, is something we're keeping an eye on as well. So that's pretty much my overview of PBS Kids. And I'm happy to take any questions. Well, there's a couple of different ways that we gauge success. It isn't all about the money. I mean, I am in a revenue generating department, but one of PBS's big missions is innovation. And so we're exploring audience, you know, how to reach new audiences or different audiences or audiences in different places. One of the metrics I use is time of play, so how long a child is engaged with an app. We do build analytics into all of our apps, so we have a pretty decent sense of what mini games they're playing, how long they're playing them for, you know, if they actually complete all of the goals that are set out within the game. Obviously, we try and target downloads just like anyone else. You know, and we have metrics internally for what we feel is a successful app. You know, generally, success starts at around 30,000 downloads for us, and then goes up from there. Yes, these are all paid apps. And we pretty much, we research based on the brand and based on the content that we've developed. We decide on a price point for each separately. So we don't have like we'll only do apps that are a particular price point. We actually take a pretty close look at that for each app separately.